Nimrod, the first great mighty one on earth. Nimrod is described in the Bible as the first mighty one on earth, Genesis 10-8, head ascendant of Cush, post-flood civilization. 1. A powerful hunter before the Lord. T. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. Genesis 10-9. This phrase has been widely interpreted. Some believe it means he was a great warrior and conqueror, before the Lord, in plea defiance of God. 2. The first kingdom builder. Unlike previous generations who were primarily nomadic, Nimrod is credited with being the first to establish cities and a centralized kingdom. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Genesis 10:10. He was not just a ruler of one city, but the founder of an empire, Assyria, Nineveh, pioneer in governance, military conquest, and civilization building. 3. Symbol of human ambition and power. Nimrod represents more than just a historical figure. He embodies human ambition and the desire for power. First organized rebellion against God by prideful rulers who oppose God's will. 4. His influence on future kingdoms. Even after his time, Nimrod's legacy influenced many ancient civilizations. The empires of Babylon and Assyria, known for the Gilgamesh and Osiris, are a legendary ruler and warrior. Conclusion. Nimrod was the first mighty ruler, wrecked self-exaltation and submission to God. Reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and aligning leadership with God's will. The founder of cities and empires, Nimrod is one of the earliest figures in history associated with city building and empire expansion. The Bible presents him as the first great ruler, shifting humanity from small, nomadic groups to organized urban civilizations. His ambitious leadership and conquests made him a pioneering figure in the development of kingdoms and centralized power. 1. The first recorded kingdom in history. Genesis 10:10 states, the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. This passage indicates that Nimrod did not merely rule a single city, established multiple urban centers. He is credited with founding Babel, Babylon, Erech, Uruk, Akkad, and Calneh, forming the early core of what would later become Mesopotamian civilization. His rule marked the transition from scattered communities to structured city-states, laying the foundation for later empires. 2. Expansion into Assyria. Nimrod's influence extended beyond Shinar. Genesis 10:11-12 states that he later moved northward and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, Ir, Calah, and Resen in what would become Assyria. These cities played crucial roles in future empires, especially the powerful Neo-Assyrian Empire, known for its military dominance and vast territorial control. His ability to establish cities across regions suggests that he was not just a warrior, but also a strategic planner, administrator, and architect of civilization. 3. The rise of urbanization and centralized power. Nimrod's city-building efforts likely introduced new forms of governance, trade, and military organization. Before his time, societies were primarily tribal and decentralized. Through his leadership, cities became centers of commerce, facilitating trade and economic development; military strength, establishing fortified cities for defense and expansion; religious and political authority, centralizing power, possibly leading to the rise of state-controlled religious systems. This urban transformation would influence many later civilizations, including Babylonia, Assyria, and Persia. 4. The symbolism of Babel and its rebellion. Nimrod is often associated with the construction of the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11:1-9. Even though his direct involvement is not explicitly stated in Scripture, Babel, the city he founded, became a center of human pride and rebellion against God. The tower was a symbol of human ambition, unity, and defiance, attempting to reach the heavens and establish independence from divine rule. God's response, confusing their language and scattering the people, signified the failure of human empires when built in opposition to God's will. Babel's legacy continued through Babylon, a recurring symbol of human arrogance and idolatry throughout the Bible. Conclusion: Nimrod was more than a hunter or warrior. He was a city builder and empire founder, shaping the course of history by establishing the first centralized kingdom. His story represents both the potential of human civilization and the dangers of power without submission to God. His influence extended far beyond his lifetime, affecting the structure of great empires that followed. The lesson from his legacy is clear. Great cities and empires rise and fall, but only what is built under God's authority truly lasts. The connection to the Tower of Babel. Nimrod is often linked to the Tower of Babel, even though the Bible does not explicitly name him as its builder. However, Genesis 10:10 states that Babylon, was the beginning of his kingdom, suggesting that he played a key role in its establishment. The Tower of Babel, described in Genesis 11:1-9, was a massive human project aimed at reaching the heavens and uniting people under a single language and purpose. The construction of the tower represented human pride and defiance against God. Instead of spreading across the earth as God had commanded, Genesis 9:1, the people, possibly under Nimrod's leadership, sought to build a city and a tower to make a name for themselves. Genesis 11:4. This act of rebellion led to God's intervention, confusing their language and scattering them across the earth. If Nimrod was indeed involved, he can be seen as the first tyrannical ruler attempting to create a worldly kingdom independent of God. His connection to Babel serves as a warning. Human ambition without submission to God ultimately leads to confusion and downfall. Nimrod and the rebellion against God. After the Great Flood, God commanded humanity to spread across the earth and multiply, Genesis 9:1. However, Nimrod, a mighty warrior and ruler, sought to unify people under his power instead. As the founder of Babel and other cities, Genesis 10:10, he led a movement that opposed God's plan, encouraging people to settle in one place rather than disperse. The greatest symbol of this rebellion was the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11:1-9. The people said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth." Genesis 11. This statement reflected human pride and defiance, suggesting they no longer relied on God, but on their own strength. Many traditions say Nimrod wanted to establish a kingdom independent of divine rule, possibly setting himself up as a godlike figure. But God intervened. He confused their language, making it impossible for them to communicate and continue the project. As a result, they were scattered across the earth, exactly as God had originally commanded. Nimrod's rebellion serves as a powerful lesson. When humanity tries to build its own power apart from God, the result is confusion and downfall. His story foreshadows the fate of many future kingdoms that would rise in arrogance, only to fall under God's judgment. The legacy and traditions about Nimrod. Nimrod remains one of the most mysterious and debated figures in the Bible. Described as the first mighty one on earth, Genesis 10-8, his name is often associated with power, rebellion, and the foundation of early civilizations. Though the biblical account of Nimrod is brief, various traditions, historical interpretations, and myths have expanded his legacy, linking him to ancient empires, idolatry, and the rise of worldly kingdoms opposed to God. 1. Nimrod as the founder of great kingdoms. The Bible states that Nimrod was the founder of Babel, Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar, Genesis 10:10. He is also credited with establishing Nineveh and other cities in Assyria, Genesis 10:11-12. These cities became the foundation of some of the most powerful empires in history, including Babylon and Assyria, both of which played major roles in biblical prophecy and the persecution of God's people. His ability to build and expand suggests he was not just a warrior, but also a strategic ruler, organizing cities into a structured empire. Some scholars believe he introduced centralized government, military conquest, and religious systems that influenced later civilizations. 2. Nimrod and the rise of idolatry. Jewish and Christian traditions outside the Bible often depict Nimrod as the first great leader to turn people away from God. Some stories suggest that he established idol worship in Babylon, replacing the true God with false deities. This aligns with the later idolatry of Babylon, a city repeatedly condemned by the prophets. The historian Flavius Josephus, 1st century AD, wrote that Nimrod sought to free people from reliance on God and turn them toward human strength and earthly power. Some traditions even claim that he declared himself a god, demanding worship from his people. This rebellious spirit is reflected throughout history, as Babylon becomes a symbol of human pride and opposition to God in both the Old and New Testaments. Revelation 17-18. 3. The connection to the Tower of Babel. While the Bible does not explicitly name Nimrod as the builder of the Tower of Babel, many scholars and traditions associate him with it. The tower represented human pride, self-sufficiency, and the desire to control destiny apart from God. Genesis 11:1-9. The people wanted to make a name for themselves, rather than obey God's command to spread across the earth. If Nimrod was indeed the leader of this effort, it would confirm his role as a ruler who united people in rebellion against God's authority. But in response, God confused their language and scattered them, disrupting Nimrod's empire-building plans and proving that no human power can stand against the will of God. 4. Nimrod in mythology and other cultures. Nimrod's name and legacy appear in various ancient traditions. Some historians and scholars believe he could be linked to Gilgamesh, Sumerian legend, a mighty king and warrior who sought immortality. Osiris, Egyptian mythology, a divine ruler associated with power and death. Marduk, Babylonian god, the chief deity of Babylon, often connected with kingship and rebellion against other gods. These connections suggest that Nimrod's historical existence influenced later myths and legends, possibly making him one of the earliest deified rulers in human history. 5. Nimrod's legacy in biblical prophecy. Even after his death, the spirit of Nimrod's rebellion lived on through the empires he founded. Babylon and Assyria later became enemies of Israel, attacking and exiling God's people. In the book of Revelation, Babylon is portrayed as the ultimate symbol of human arrogance, idolatry, and opposition to God. Revelation 17-18. Many theologians believe that Nimrod foreshadows future leaders who will oppose God's kingdom, including the Antichrist, who will unite nations in rebellion against Christ in the end times.